Guys, the stage is over here. There you go.
Oh.
Go away.
All right, we're waiting for the narrator.
All right. Scene 1. Lydia and Kitty encounter Mr. Wickham and Mr. Benny in Meryton. Lydia and Kitty Bennett wait anxiously for the soldiers to march to Meryton.
The soldier's appearance is quite striking.
The last march was quite tiring, would you agree?
I concur. However, flirting with the fine young ladies in town will raise our spirits, particularly the one holding the parcel.
I do believe that is Kitty Bennett with the bow in her hair, so that must be one of the lovely Bennett sisters.
Are you well acquainted with the young woman? If so, would you care to introduce me?
Of course.
It appears that Mr. Denny is walking toward us. His friend is quite handsome.
Hello, Kitty. How are you feeling today?
Very well, thank you, sir.
May I introduce you to my friend, Mr. Wickham?
Very pleased to meet you, Mr. Wickham. Mr. Denny, this is my sister, Lydia.
Hello, very pleased to make your acquaintance.
The pleasure is all mine.
Shall we see you at the next ball?
Of course, I do love balls.
Very well.
We must be off. Have a pleasant day.
You as well.
I dare say that Mr. Wickham is devilishly handsome.
I agree.
I hope he's inclined to ask me to dance the first 2 dances of the next ball. Quick, let us finish our shopping. We may return home to tell our mother about the soldiers.
Oh, the umpire. And
Scene 2.
Hey, look, hey. Can you just get on this?
You got it on purpose.
Folks.
Proposing to Elizabeth several times, despite receiving multiple rejections. Mrs. Bennet is in a panic and rushes to her husband in an attempt to ally his support in persuading Lizzie to accept.
Oh, Mr. Bennet, you must come and make Lizzie marry Mr. Collins. If you do not make haste, he will change his mind.
I have not the pleasure of understanding you. What are you talking?
Oh, Mr. Collins and Lizzie. Lizzie declares she will not have Mr. Collins, and Mr. Collins begins to say that he will not have Lizzie.
And what am I to do on the occasion? It seems a hopeless business.
Speak to Lizzie about it yourself. Tell her that you insist upon her marrying him.
Let her be called back. She shall hear my opinion.
Lizzie!
I understand that Mr. Collins has made you an offer of marriage. Is that true?
yes,
Very well. And this offer of marriage you have refused.
I have, sir.
Your mother insists upon your accepting it.
Yes,
Is
sir.
that not so, Miss Bennet?
Yes, sir. I will never see her again.
An unhappy alternative is before you, Elizabeth. From this day, you must be a stranger to one of your parents. Your mother will never see you again if you do not marry Mr. Collins, and I will never see you again if you do.
Well, I can understand it if I were to become estranged from you, my dear father. As for my mother, it would be a great shame to never see her again. So I'll have to hope that she can find it in her heart to forgive me.
What do you mean, Mr. Bennet, by talking in this way? You promised me to insist upon her marrying him.
My dear, I have 2 small favors to request. That you allow me the free use of my understanding on the present occasion, and secondly, of my room. I shall be glad to have the library to myself as soon as may be.
Mrs. Bennet is extremely disappointed in her husband for not persuading Elizabeth to accept Mr. Collins' proposals. Still, this does not stop her from coaxing and threatening Elizabeth, and she even attempts to recruit James and Charlotte's assistance. However, no one chooses to ally themselves with her, and in the end, Elizabeth successfully avoids having to marry Mr. Collins.
Good job. Center stage, folks.
Scene 2. Miss Bingley and Elizabeth, Darcy and Bingley in the drawing room at Netherfield. Mr. Darcy is writing a letter in the drawing room. Miss Bingley is looking over Darcy's shoulder. Bingley and Elizabeth are reading. Upon Jane's arrival at Netherfield, she has fallen ill and is forced to stay there until her health returns, just as Mrs. Bennet planned. Elizabeth, her loyal sister, has come to pay Jane a visit. Mr. Darcy, Elizabeth, Miss Bingley, and Mr. Bingley pass the time in the drawing room.
Oh my, your handwriting is so exquisite. I'm very pleased with the length of your letter to Georgiana. You must be a very loyal brother.
Yes, well, I try.
I do believe I'm a fine brother as well, don't you think, sister?
Oh brother, you are agreeable to me because you bring over extraordinary companions, such as Mr. Darcy.
You need not flatter me with hollow compliments.
When one uses flattery often, the effect of the compliment progressively declines. However, when flattery is a rarity, the compliments continue.
Ooh, you are very well spoken, Elizabeth.
Well, I do not believe I overuse my compliments. I have never used one on you, Elizabeth. Perhaps if you entertain me with a turn about the drawing room, I will find aspects of your character which I deem deserving of flattery.
Oh, but I'm so engaged in this novel that I find it hard to part with it.
Oh no, no, please, it's so refreshing. I promise it will be a pleasant time.
You insist.
So, what may you be laughing at?
I'm merely amused by your current activities.
What then is so amusing to you, Mr. Darcy?
Well, I suspect that you are taking a turn about the room to discuss secret affairs, or because you are aware that your figures appear to the greatest advantage in walking.
I do agree with Mr. Darcy.
I'm shocked. Well, if you are through poking fun at us, I would like to retire to my bedroom.
I am quite exhausted as well.
Good night, then.
Good night.
Thanks.
Elizabeth is playing the piano for Colonel Fitzwilliam at Rosings Park. Mr. Darcy has come over to listen, and Elizabeth is feeling very ungenerous towards him, and thus accuses him of trying to intimidate her. He replies that she is professing opinions that are not her own. She then remarks to Colonel Fitzwilliam how Darcy is being ungenerous, and that she could retaliate with things about Darcy that would be shocking to hear. We now start with Colonel Fitzwilliam's reply. Pray tell me what you have to accuse him of. I should like to know how he behaves among strangers.
You shall hear then, but prepare yourself for something very dreadful. The first time of my ever seeing him was in Hertfordshire, at a ball. And do you know what he did? He danced only 4 dances, although gentlemen were scarce.
I had not at the time had the honor of knowing any lady in the assembly behind my own heart.
True, and nobody can ever be introduced in a ballroom.
Perhaps I should have judged better, had I thought an introduction, but I'm ill qualified to recommend myself to strangers.
Shall we ask your cousin the reason of this? Why a man of sense and education, and who has lived in the world, is ill qualified to recommend himself to strangers?
I can answer your question without applying to him. It is because he will not give himself the trouble.
I certainly have not had the talent which some people possess of conversing easily with those I have never seen before.
My fingers do not move over this instrument in the masterly manner which I have seen so many women do, but I have always supposed it to be my own fault, because I would not take the trouble of practicing. It is not that I do not believe my fingers as capable as other women's.
You are perfectly right. You have employed your time much better. No one admitted to the privilege of hearing you can think anything wanting. neither of us prefer him to strangers.
What are you talking of? Miss Bennett would not play at all amiss if she practiced more. She has a very good notion of fingering, but her taste is not quite equal to Anne's. Anne would have been a delightful performer had her health allowed her to learn.
Elizabeth observes Mr. Darcy's behavior towards Anne's traits, but at no time could she discern any symptom of love. Elizabeth remained at the piano, and Lady Catherine continued her remarks when Elizabeth played, mixing with them many instructions on execution and taste. The evening continues this way until her ladyship's carriage was ready to take them all.
Predicament and Pemberley. During Elizabeth's vacation with the Gardners, the three decide to visit the estate of Pemberley. This lovely home was inherited by Mr. Darcy, who is currently out of town on business. Although Elizabeth has reservations about visiting Darcy's estate, she agrees to go, and she and her family take a tour of Pemberley. After touring the house and becoming intrigued by the splendor of such a magnificent home, Elizabeth and the Gardners decide to continue their tour by walking the grounds. However, fate intervenes with their plans.
My, this building is quite wonderful. I am amazed by its natural beauty, yet I cannot tell its age.
Oh, how I would love to live in such an ornate house as this. Wouldn't you, my dear?
The man who lives here must be one of great character. He has such an exquisite taste.
Suddenly, the owner himself comes forward from the road. The two parties are within 20 yards of one another.
Oh, by what chance do we have such a pleasure? A visitor.
Mr. Darcy advances towards the party and speaks to Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, it's my pleasure to see you.
Oh, hello, Mr. Darcy. I was told you wouldn't be home. Please excuse my family and me. We were just leaving.
Well, don't let my presence send you away. Tell me, how's your family?
Fine.
And your sisters, are they well?
Yes, very much so.
Are you here on vacation?
Yes.
Where have you traveled?
Oh, just Derbyshire and Pemberley, of course.
And your parents, how are they?
They're fine. And no, they remain at Longbourn.
Okay, so they're not with you. And your sisters?
They're home as well.
After a long, uncomfortable silence, Darcy bids adieu and retreats into his home. Mr. and Mrs. Gardner and reunite with their niece. They begin to walk the Pemberley grounds.
That Mr. Darcy seems like a fine man.
Yes.
Did you enjoy your conversation? The two of you seemed quite intimate.
Oh, what a fine garden over there.
Oh, yes.
After walking the grounds, Elizabeth and the Gardners once again approach Pemberley, where Mr. Darcy is waiting.
Did you enjoy your walk? What is your impression of Pemberley?
It's simply delightful. I especially admire the multitude of fish present in your waltzes.
Do you like to fish?
Oh, it's a favorite pastime of mine.
Well, we do have a great supply of fishing tackle, and I will be overjoyed to point out my favorite fishing locations. Please do honor me in accompanying me.
Yes, of course, it is settled.
Darcy then accompanies the party to their awaiting carriage. He and Elizabeth venture forward, walking ahead of the Gardners.
So, what are your impressions of my estate?
It was quite charming and delightful. I thank you for your graciousness.
Oh, please, do me the honor of staying a little while longer.
No, I must be on my way.
Well, if you must, but you will allow me, or I do ask too much, to introduce my sister to your acquaintance during your stay.
Of course. Why, I would be honored to.
Well, until then.
Goodbye, Mr. Dawson.
End scene.
Hmm.
Unexpected and unannounced guests. After overcoming the shock of Lydia's spontaneous marriage, life at Longbourn has returned to a more simplistic state. However, with Mr. Bingley's and Mr. Darcy's return to town, life in the Bennet household may never be the same again. At the current moment, Mr. Bingley and Mr. Darcy have just set foot on the Bennet's property. The women of the Bennet household are both excited and surprised at the arrival of the unlikely duo. Mother, a gentleman is approaching. Whoever could it be?
Some acquaintance or other, my dear. I am sure I do not know.
It appears it is Mr. Bingley, accompanied by Mr. Darcy.
Good gracious, Mr. Darcy. I simply loathe that man. But any friend of Mr. Bingley's will always be welcome here. But else, I must say that I hate the very sight of him. Why, hello, Mr. Bingley. And hello, Mr. Darcy. What a pleasure it is to see you back in town.
The pleasure is ours.
Please, come in. Take a seat.
Good afternoon, Miss Bennet.
Hello, Mr. Darcy, Mr. Bingley.
Why, hello.
Oh, Mr. Bingley, it has been such a long time since I've seen you last. Tell me, what have you been up to?
Indeed, it has been a long time. I must apologize.
I began to be afraid that you would never come back. People did say you meant to quit the place entirely. But however, I had hoped that it could not be true. A great many changes have happened in the neighborhood since you went away.
Really? How so?
Well, both Miss Lucas and my daughter, Lydia, have married. Perhaps you have seen it in the papers. Unfortunately, it was to my great displeasure the newspaper failed to mention her father or the place where she lived or anything. Only read, lately, George Wickham, Esquire, to Miss Lydia Bennet. Can you imagine? My nerves were and remain quite on edge.
Oh my, well congratulations to you and Miss Lydia. You must be overjoyed to have a daughter in wedlock.
I very much am so. I hope my other daughters will one day experience marriage. Why, they mustn't remain with Mr. Bennet and me the rest of our lives.
Mr. Darcy seems so changed since I saw him last.
I suppose. Mother really takes a liking to Mr. Bingley. I feel quite sorry for Mr. Darcy, however.
Should I expect it to be otherwise? Yet why did he come?
I am afraid I do not know, sister. He appears quite uncomfortable. I do hope Mother comes to her senses and engages Mr. Darcy in her conversation.
Oh, you are quite the character, Mr. Bingley. I'm very happy for your return.
Mr. Darcy, how is your sister, Georgiana? I do hope she's of good health.
Yes, she is in the greatest of health. Oh, how I dearly miss her presence when she's not around.
She's a lovely lady, and I'm sure a fine sister. Please tell her I said hello.
I will. Now tell me, Elizabeth, how are your relatives, the Gardners? I hope they're good.
Yes, very much so.
Oh, Mr. Bingley, are you aware of Newcastle? I'm afraid that is where Lydia and Wickham now make a residence so far north, for his regiment is there. I'm sure you have heard of his leaving and entering the regulars. Thank heaven. He has some friends, though perhaps not as many as he deserves.
Mr. Bingley, do you intend to stay in the country?
Yes, for a few weeks I suppose.
When you have killed your own birds, Mr. Bingley, I beg you come here and shoot as many as you please in Mr. Bennet's manner.
Oh, what prejudice.
Jane, I must compliment you. You look quite beautiful today.
Why, thank you.
And tell me, what have you been up to since I last saw you?
The summer passed. I traveled to London to visit my dear aunt and uncle.
Oh well, I hope you have enjoyed yourself.
Oh, most certainly.
I do hope you realize just how much I've enjoyed this visit. I'm afraid we must be on our way. Mr. Darcy?
Oh, you are quite a visit in my debt, Mr. Bingley. For when you went to town last year, you promised to take a family dinner with us. I was very much disappointed that you did not come back and keep your engagement.
Oh, I must apologize. Business has prevented me. We must dine soon.
Mr. Darcy? Mr. Bingley? Mr. Bingley?
Oh, I wish they would have stayed for dinner, but alas, my meal has been insufficient on such short notice. I look forward to their return.
All right, good job. Some highlights.